Welcome to Fireside Chats. Just real talk, real faith, and the moment God meets us in. I'm glad you're here. Let's talk. Hey y'all, I wanted to sit down today and just talk for a minute. Not a deep theological breakdown, just something real. The last Fireside Chat, when we talked about that moment where God tells Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It's one of those verses people quote a lot, but it feels very different when weakness stops being theoretical. As you all know, earlier this year I had a stroke. 1 minute life was normal. The next moment I was in a hospital bed trying to understand what had just happened to my body. Since then it's been therapy, recovering, learning new limits, relearning new stuff, pacing my brain, and figuring out what healing actually looks like day to day. And just as I was starting to get my footing again, my dad had a serious fall. He hit his head and ended up needing emergency brain surgery. So the last few weeks have been hospitals, rehab plans for him, doctor visits, prayers, and a lot of long days. And I'll tell you something honestly. There have been moments where that verse from that last episode stopped being something I was teaching. It started being something I had to live inside. My grace is sufficient for you. Not everything will make sense right away. Not, this will be easy. Just grace for today. Grace for the next step. Grace for strength you didn't know you needed until the moment you needed it. Today was actually the first day in a while where I didn't have anything scheduled. No therapy, no hospital trips, no urgent phone calls, nothing. And it might sound small, but I cleaned the desk off a little, and for the first time in a little while, I felt normal. Not fully strong yet, not completely back to where I used to be, but normal enough to breathe. And honestly, that felt like a miracle. Because sometimes when we think about miracles, we imagine something dramatic, something instant, something that changes everything overnight. But sometimes God's grace shows up in quieter ways. Sometimes the miracle looks like strength slowly coming back. Sometimes it looks like peace in the middle of uncertainty. And sometimes it looks like waking up and realizing you made it through another day. And today, while I was sitting there thinking about all of this, I remembered a story one of my pastors tells sometimes. He said he once heard one of the old saints say something simple but powerful. He quoted it saying, "My God owns both sides of the river, so it doesn't matter which side I'm standing on." And I love that, because sometimes life feels like standing on one side of the river you didn't choose. One side looks like health. The other side looks like recovery. One side looks like things are going the way you planned. The other side looks like everything changing overnight. Sometimes one side feels like strength. And the other side feels like weakness. But that old saint had it right. God doesn't just own the side where everything is going well. He owns both sides of that river. So whether you're standing in the middle of a miracle, you're standing in the middle of a long, slow healing process, you're still standing on ground that belongs to Him. And that changes how you walk through things. Because it means you're never outside of His care, never outside of His presence or His grace. Grace doesn't always remove the fire. Sometimes it's what carries us through. Sometimes grace looks like the strength that you didn't know you had. Sometimes it looks like peace showing up in the middle of a storm. Or sometimes it's just a quiet reminder that God is still right there with you, even when nothing around you feels settled yet. And when you start to see it that way, you realize something. You're not walking through that fire alone. So if you're listening right now and life feels heavy, if things haven't gone the way you have planned, if you're still waiting for answers or healing or clarity, hear this. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. And you are not failing because the journey is slower than you had expected. Sometimes the evidence of God's grace is simply this. You're still here. You're still breathing. You're still standing. and you're still taking the next step. And that means His grace is still working. Love y'all.